All right, there we are. Hi, everybody. My name is Jimmy. I am an alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober. It's always been customary where I come from to let you know that I have a home group. It's called the Design for Living Group on the Jersey Shore. I have a sponsor. I have a service sponsor. Sponsor a lot of guys, but most importantly, I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was on March 28th, 1987. So extremely grateful for this way of life and for Alcoholics Anonymous, and to be here tonight with a lot of friends out there. And Alice, you're the best. I'll tell you. All I heard was attractive, and that's all I'm thinking about. Attractive, you know. So thank you so much for that. And we try our best, and everything I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous has been taught to me. Right? I'm not making none. None of this stuff is made up. It's you get a bunch of old timers in your life, and you just follow what they do. And as a result of that, I have a pretty good life. And my wife's on here today, and excited about that. So again, thank you. So about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, I celebrated 37 years of sobriety. I still pinch myself when I think of that, because I always get very reflective around my anniversary. I don't know if I don't think it's morbid reflection, but it is reflection about where I came from. And like many of us, I'll just throw this question out: what did it look like on the day before day one? What happened? What did it look like the week before day one? What did it look like those few months before the first time, and hopefully the last time that it came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous? And what happened to me was, on March 28th, 1987, I was instructed to go to Newark Airport because they were hiring guys like us. And it was an airline that would hire anyone. And I wound up there with two other guys. And I'm going to make the story short because many of you heard it before. But the bottom line was, after a little interview, I sat down. At this point in my life, I'm living on the streets for 19 months. I'm homeless, totally broken, totally sick, totally out of my mind. I'm 29 years old. I have no direction. And I sit in a chair in the middle of Newark Airport. I can feel the wind blowing through my soul. I understand that drinking might be a problem. It took me a while to understand that day, until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and opened up that blue book and read Bill's first step description. One I think he gives us for all of us, really, when he says, "No words could tell the loneliness and despair I felt in a bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I met my match. I've been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master." And at 29 years old, it was the first time in that airport that I think drinking might be a problem. And within a couple of minutes, a complete stranger sat next to me. And after a couple of minutes, he looked at me and said, "What's your problem?" And for whatever reason, I know the reason. It's God's grace. I spit my life story up on this stranger. And he said, "I have the answer for you." He asked me, "Is it possible not for you not to take a drink the rest of this day?" And I was honest with him. I want to drink right now. Pulled out a piece of paper. There was no cell phones, no beepers, Yes, young people, there was a time when there was no cell phones and no beepers. And wrote down a street, said, "Stand in front of this address and I'll be there at 7 o'clock tonight." And that stranger pulled up with a bunch of other strangers in that car. And they said, "The most spiritual thing you'll ever hear in Alcoholics Anonymous, get in the car." And I got in the car with these gentlemen. They brought me to my first meeting, and 37 years and 1 month, here I sit. And much of my life has been living in the darkness. And that's why I picked out this little topic, And not only most of my life, but a lot of my sobriety, I've been in the darkness too, And why? Why am I in the darkness? Why do we all fall into the darkness of our lives? Well, I think for me, I know what it is for me, because I have a mind that's driven by fear. I have a mind that's driven by insecurity. I have a mind that's driven by, inadequacies. I got secrets. I got all this stuff going on, and I'm not taking really a look at it. And though I was an active member in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, it wasn't until I found myself in a railroad room apartment on the Jersey side of the Hudson River looking over at Manhattan when I was given that spiritual test, a test that maybe some of you guys have gotten. And this gentleman who the day before called me out at a meeting, and he basically told me, "You're screwed," but a little bit saltier language. And I wanted to start a fist fight because I don't know how to face confrontation without violence. I don't know how to face resistance with no resistance. But I look at this gentleman, I said, you're right, I need help. And I find myself in his apartment the next day, and he's asking me a few questions. And the first question he asked me was, how long can you hold your breath? How long can you hold your breath? How long can you be in a 12-step program and not work the 12 steps? Second question he asked me was, what makes you alcoholic? And the best I can come up with in that moment, or the best I could stammer out of my mouth in that moment, was I drink too much. No idea about the physical allergy, no idea about the mental obsession. Third question he asked me is, what's your relationship with God look like? And though I'm a Catholic and though I believe in God, what does God have to do with what we're doing here? Then he asked me a question that most of you guys might not believe, but this is the way it was in my neighborhood in the 80s in AA. He looked at me and said, where's your big book? And I looked at him and I said, what's a big book? Now, I'm not embarrassed by my answers. I'm probably more embarrassed to let you know I was 5 years sober at that moment, an active member of a home group in my town. And I had no idea what a big book was because we didn't talk about the book like we do today. I come from a place where it was speaker meetings, discussion meetings, maybe the 12 and 12, that kind of stuff. And then he asked me, well, he didn't ask me, it was really a consideration. He said, Jimmy, if AA works, why do you have so many problems? The reason why is because I'm not working AA. You see, alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle, it comes in my mind. And my mind is filled with a lot of delusions about a lot of things. And one of the biggest delusions I believed in my early days of AA is that abstinence is the solution to a spiritual malady. Right? I also understood that my life had no purpose. It took me a long time to understand what that really meant. It means that I feel like I'm spiritually disqualified at time. That why would God ever help a guy like me? I've been living my life like a pirate for the last 16 years. Why would God ever help a guy like me? And I'm going to tell you something, nothing will stop our walk faster than the feeling of no purpose. Right? But I sat with this gentleman and he talked about the 2 goals of Alcoholics Anonymous, in his opinion, kind of my opinion today too. The first goal, the obvious one, don't pick up the first drink. Second goal is the goal we all want to attain, and that has to do with the topic tonight. It's to enter the sunlight of the Spirit, to get to that place where we experience really all the promises that are in our literature, the place where we experience where the bondage of self gets removed, we experience where we get placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. It's a place where Bill Wilson likes to call it utopia, a perfect place, a place of freedom. And that's really was the goal. And as I sat with this gentleman and we talked about a lot of things, I didn't think that could work for a guy like me. I didn't think that could work for a guy like me. But he sat with me on this particular day and he talked about these things. I have this kitchen table downstairs, and a lot of you guys have heard this before. I got a kitchen table downstairs with a long hallway, and there's a glass door in the front of my house. And today was a beautiful day on the Jersey Shore, warm, sunny. And every guy that ever sat at my kitchen table, I'd point at that door and say, there's the goal, to walk out that door into the freedom, into the sunlight of the Spirit. But in order to walk into that sunlight of the Spirit, I got to walk through the darkness of this hallway. And I got to uncover, discover, and discard the things that are blocking me. You see, when you live in the darkness, that balks at investigation. Living in the darkness doesn't want me to look at me. And I didn't understand why. Next Wednesday will be May 1st. If any of you read the daily reflections, I really encourage you to next Wednesday. Well, every day really, but next Wednesday is probably the most important reading, a reading that I've been reading forever. It's a reading that I say all the time, if you ever heard me speak. But on May 1st, in Daily Reflections, it says, it's a side of myself that I refuse to look at that rules me. I must be willing to look at the dark side in order to heal my mind and my heart, because that's the road to freedom. I must walk into darkness to find the light, and to walk into fear to find peace. The way the old timers used to say stuff like that was this: AA is like a big bonfire. A lot of people are walking around the fire, but eventually the fire is going to go off or go out. But what they used to say to me and guys like me is that if you really want to change, if you really want to have a relationship, If you really want to have a prayer life and a meditation life and an inventory life, if you really want to become a different person, you have to walk through that fire and get your ass burnt and feel the uncomfortability of change. Now, there's one thing I can't do for anyone in here, and none of you guys could do for me, and none of you could do for each other, and that's put willingness in your heart, right? Willingness is an inside job. And what makes us willing? Circumstances make us willing. I don't know if Ralph's on here, but I like Ralph's definition. A good whooped ass makes you willing. But just being sick and tired of being sick and tired of living this way of life sober and living in the darkness where I'm not growing. So yeah, darkness balks at investigation. I live with fear. I live with insecurities. I live with inadequacies. And then I'm presented a program of action. And all I need to do is take these steps. And all of a sudden I balk. I balk because I'm afraid. I love the line, or I love the paragraph that Bill writes in How It Works, that some of these we balk. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, but the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Why can't I let go? Why can't I be willing to go towards the light? Why can't I be willing to change? I've come to find out it's really one word, and that word is pride. And you see, pride is the essence of self-centeredness, and pride will always lead the procession of all my other character defects. But more importantly, pride will always step into place when I'm in spiritual stagnation. But I was willing as I sat with this gentleman on this particular day. He talked to me about the progression of my drinking, but he also talked about the progression of my behaviors. And as we talked about a lot of things, what he really did for me was he painted me so far into a corner that I had no choice but to take one of those two alternatives: spiritual life, spiritual death. So on this particular day, I was willing to go into the darkness of that hallway and to uncover, discover, and discard the things that are blocking me from God, and to use prayer and to use meditation and to use inventory as the tool, as the toolbox, as the tools to bring me towards the light, right? Asking God for strength and direction and courage to do the walk, trying to practice meditation to the best of my ability to try to stay present, right? On that page that I picked out on page 98, the 12 and 12, it says, we will want the good that is in all of us, even the worst, to flower and to grow. So am I willing to go in? And as I started to go in, I started to bring down the walls. I don't know what your walls are, but I'll tell you what my walls are. I got the walls of excuses. I got the walls of alibis. I got the walls of blame. I got the walls of racism, bigotry, hatred, homophobia. I got all that stuff. And those walls needed to come down. But what keeps me in the darkness? The lack of acceptance of what my life really looked like. And like Ralph says, and I'll use Ralph again, I don't know if he's on here, what does your walk look like? You know, is your walk heavy or is your walk light? And then when you live in the darkness, most times your walk is real heavy. But I was willing to go in and start to uncover, discover, and discard the things that are blocking me from God, using prayer, using meditation, using inventory as the tool to get me free. I love Don Major's book that he wrote before he passed, or after he passed, well, when it came out. You know, the title of that book, Stumbling in the Right Direction. Right? It doesn't look pretty going into inventory. It doesn't feel comfortable. It doesn't feel good to uncover and discover and look at the things in my life that are blocking me from God and blocking me from you. Right? It's like my little granddaughter. You know, I think of her, she's 20 years old. When she started to walk, she did more steps sideways than she did forward. But isn't that what we do when we go into the step work? As we pray, we meditate, we take inventory. It doesn't look good, but it's progress. One step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time, using prayer and meditation as the tool. So with every step, and with every step we do, we start to step out of the darkness of our life and we start to grow a little bit. We start to go towards the light. Step one, admitting my powerlessness, not only over the drink, but eventually over all the other things in my life. People, places, things, behaviors. Who wants to admit complete defeat? Asking God for strength and courage to look at that stuff. Step two, willingness to open my mind that I don't have the answer. How many times have you guys say the set aside prayer, the lay aside prayer? God, please set aside everything I think I know about what? Well, let's make it easy. Everything. So I can have a new experience and see new truth about myself. And then going into that third step, acknowledging that self is the problem. And not to beat myself up on that. Later on, as we get into step 11, it talks about having a proper attitude, an appropriate feeling for oneself. You can't grow spiritually. You can't go to the light and beat yourself up at the same time. Those highways don't crisscross. And then eventually walking into that inventory process, using prayer, using inventory, asking God for help, walking into that hallway, getting down to the common manifestations of living a life of self-will, looking at all the rage and anger that I had in myself, looking at all the fear, looking at all the harms, looking at all the unhealthy dependencies I put on people that make me feel better, using people, putting unreal expectations on people. And then eventually, just taking an honest look. And then when I sat with this guy and started to go through that fifth step, I had to do something that I thought was a weakness because I'm a tough guy from the streets. And real men don't talk about how they feel, and real men don't, show their weakness. Real men are strong. I got all those John Wayneisms, as we used to call it, back in the early days of AA. But I had to do something that was I thought was a weakness, but it's really strength in disguise. And I had to be vulnerable to another man. I had to trust someone, and I had to bring that man into my life and start talking about these things. And when I started to do these actions, using prayer, using inventory, using meditation, along with all the actions I was taking throughout the steps, I love the line that it says at the end of We Agnostics, as we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. The more I shed, the closer I get to the light. The more I get rid of, the closer I get to the light. The more I talk about, and the more I acknowledge, the more I pray, the more I meditate, I get closer to the light. And what I started to see about me is that the light started to go inside myself. And the guy that started off at the beginning of this hallway wasn't the guy that was halfway into the hallway. I started to feel the pilot light go on inside of me. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And all I needed to do was to be willing to continue the work that is laid out in front of me. I think my sponsor likes to call it, after we got into the fifth step, the infancy of a spiritual experience. Another promise in the fifth step is we feel we're on a broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. So these actions, these things I had to do and I had to take, all of a sudden I started to feel something. I started to feel different. You read the spiritual experience. I started to feel that transformation going on, even though I didn't really see it in myself, others saw it in me. And I started to see it in other people. I had one of the most unbelievable fifth steps ever, and it wasn't mine. My old sponsor, Peter M., said to me, this is probably 17 years ago, 20, I don't even know how long ago, a long time ago. And Peter was living in Jersey, and we go up to, we used to drive up to his home group. And he said to me, I'm going to Texas this weekend. I need you to listen to a fifth step of this guy I sponsor. And he pointed down the room to a guy who was a Orthodox Jewish man, very different than what I look like. And then I saw him, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. And then in my mind, then I saw Peter walk down to the end of the other room and point to me. And I could see in that guy's mind, he said, I don't want to do that with that guy, right? I had a lot of old ideas about sitting with a guy like that. He's not like me. But I say yes because I always say yes. So this guy comes over on Sunday to my house right downstairs. I don't know where my wife was, but very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. But he sits at my kitchen table and we start to talk. And before you know it, as he's reading his inventory to me, something was happening. He started to trust me. I trusted him. And the conversation went on for hours. When we were done with his fifth step, I said to him, listen, you need to go out into the backyard. He didn't have a ride to he got a ride to my house. I said, just sit on my back deck and take the hour. Take your book, read the last paragraph on page 75, and he did. I went up, took a shower, and I came down. Let me tell you what happened. This man who was not like me, who looked very different from me, walked through my sliding door. And as I looked at him walk in, I could see a light around him. I could see the transformation, physical transformation. This guy just lost 100 pounds of grief and worry and everything else off his body. This gentleman walked into my house. I'd never seen anything like that. And I've listened to hundreds of footsteps. Something was different in that guy. Years later, I'm doing a talk in New York City at the Atlantic Group, big group in New York City. And I'm walking down the middle of the pews because it's inside the church, when all of a sudden somebody jumps on my back, and it's this guy. And it really, if you looked at it, you said, wow, it looks like Jimmy just robbed a jewelry store and this guy's on his back. But the thing was, this guy was excited about recovery, excited about what's going on. The light was in him. He was growing. 6 months ago, I was in a meeting doing a little talk, and all of a sudden I saw a guy shuffle in with a woman. And I'm looking at him and say, that guy looks familiar. Now, this is 15 years later. At the end of the talk, the guy came up to me and goes, do you remember me? I said, you look familiar, but I can't, I'm getting old. I can't remember anything. He goes, you're the one who took me through the steps, and you took me through that fifth step that time. But then he told me his name, and I couldn't believe it. And he said, I have 2 days back, and I'm dying of alcoholism. So this thing that we do, this continuing growing in the likeness of our higher power, this continuous to keep in the sunlight of our spirit takes work. And, I'm giving examples all the time of this going on. I like telling this story lately because this was a powerful thing. I found my father dead at 18 months. Me and my old man, we just clashed, but he was so happy for those 18 months of my 18 months that I was sober that I met you. And things started to get easier. And what happened was, when I found my father dead on the floor, I called my sponsor. He told me to let's pray and call 911. And when I did, after a couple, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the cops came. The first cop comes up and he's taking information down. He looks at me and goes, hey, I don't see you walking the streets anymore. I said, yeah, I don't do that anymore. Taking down a little bit more information. And he says to me, matter of fact, I don't even see you drinking anymore. And I looked at him. I said, yeah, I don't drink anymore. After a couple of minutes, he looks at me and goes, how do you not drink anymore? And he started to tell me about his drinking. And see, back in those days, 12-step calls was, a common practice. We used to go out on 12-step calls all the time. And I knew the signs. I heard the language. And what happened is I started to 12-step this guy over my dead father's body. I haven't seen that guy since, until last year. I'm in my home group, huge home group, talking with the guys up front when I get a tap on my shoulder. I turn around and the guy looks familiar, but I don't know who he is. He goes, do you remember me? I said, you look familiar, but I don't know. I don't remember who you are. He goes, I'm the police officer, now retired, who was with you on the day that your dad died. And I've been looking for you. And I'm here to let you know that I just celebrated 34 years of sobriety. Now, I don't tell you that story because I don't have the power to get anyone drunk. I don't have the power to get anyone sober. But I'll tell you what, the light was on in this gentleman. He was fired up about Alcoholics Anonymous. As a matter of fact, God will use us without our permission, even in the hardest times. When you think of a drink, you reach for a drunk. That's what the old timers used to say. So this idea of having the light in all of us. And as I look at all of you, I can see the light in you. I can see the smiles. I can see the happiness. And if you're not happy and you're having a tough time, well, I read a page, or I read something, I don't know. It was called The 4 Roadblocks to the Sunlight of the Spirit. And it was written by Sam Shoemaker, the Episcopal priest who ran the Calvary Church in New York City. and he helped Bill greatly in the early days, the Oxford group. You know, he gave us a lot of information for the steps. And these 4 roadblocks, this is what he wrote. Is there and think of yourself right now. I have to think of myself. This is an inventory, right? We do lots of different types of inventories, but here's an inventory. Is there a person, institution, or principle I won't forgive, be reconciled with, or accept? What does it look like with your family right now? What does it look like with your coworkers? What does it look like with your AA home group? You know, where am I still having trouble in my relationships? Second thing he said, is there a restitution I will not make or as yet haven't made, right? As financial fear creep back up in my life again. Is this stuff keeping me in the darkness of my life? Am I not looking at this stuff, pretending to be okay when I'm really not okay? The third thing he talks about, is there a defect of character, personal shortcoming, or doubtful pleasure that I won't give up? Do I still live with the illusion that my character defects have value? I think anger works for me sometimes. Am I looking at that stuff? And then finally he says, is there something from my past that I've held back when taking inventory or sharing for confession? What's your secret? What's my secret? I'll never be free with secrets in my back pocket. I'll never grow. I'll never experience the sunlight. I'll never be the guy I want to be if I'm living a double life in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I knew that. I knew that as I was going through this process. I knew that I had to shed this stuff and get rid of this stuff, or I'll never be free. I knew I would never go through that glass door with a secret in my back pocket. It's not going to happen. I'm going to get loaded again. I know me, right? So the willingness to use prayer, meditation, inventory, actions that we have to take to get free. You know, we get to step 10 and we talk about, you know, we read it off the shade. It looks like, yeah, we acknowledge a problem. We click our heels. We might say, I'm sorry to somebody. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you read our literature when it comes to step 10, it says we have entered the world of the spirit. So the discussion on step 10 should always be in the world of the spirit. And what's the language we use when we're in the world of the spirit? Well, if you think about it, it's really the promises after the 9th step. You know, I'm not going to read them, but we're going to know a new freedom, a new happiness. We will not regret the past. Shut the door. We will comprehend the words serenity. I mean, think about those 12 promises. Take each promise, turn it into a question. Is this really happening in my life? And if it isn't, why not? Right? I don't know how many boxing fans are out there or UFC fans, you know, you're prize fighting, you know. And if you watch a fight, you know, you ever notice like before the fight, they call it the tail of the tape. Here's the 2 opponents. And in this corner, we got darkness, we got heaviness, and we got bedevilments in that corner. And in this corner, we got freedom and sunlight and the promises. What corner you in? That's what my sponsor asked me. What corner are you in? Where are you in the corners? Am I free or am I not free? Is the light and growing going on? Or am I dying in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous again? And if I'm not experiencing the light, or maybe not experiencing the promises, is it possible that maybe I just need to go through the steps again? Or am I trying to stay full on a meal that I ate 8 years ago? Is it time to be willing to go back in? Willing to go in because nothing grows in the dark. Am I willing to go towards the light again? Is it possible, just possible, maybe possible, that I'm still playing God in everyone's life? Under the delusion of control, right? That I can control situations, I can control people in my life. Or am I still putting faulty dependencies on people? Do I expect my wife, who's on here now somewhere, to do certain things to make me feel better? Or is it my responsibility to take care of me and for her to take care of her so we can come together as a unit? Is it possible that I'm still putting unhealthy expectations on people, like my children, my grandchildren, my brothers and sisters, my neighbors, my coworkers, my AA group, right? Is it possible, just possible, that I'm still procrastinating on my inventory? You know, those guys and girls that you might be sponsoring. It's taking forever to go through the resentment inventory, the fear inventory, the harms inventory. Is it possible, just possible, that maybe I haven't finished my amends from the past? And as a result of not finishing my amends and owing the money that I owe and, you know, doing all those things, that it's keeping me in the dark. But I'm not a free man, even though I claim to be a free man. And then is it possible, just possible, that I'm not sharing my secrets out of embarrassment, out of fear? Um, did I lose the screen or is something going on? There you go, 5 minutes. All right. So what's that thing? What's the thing that blocks us from growing? What does my prayer life look like? What does my meditation life look like? What does my inventory look like? You know, or am I just sitting back, pat myself on the back, attaboy, 37 years sober, I don't have to, I can take my foot off the wheel and then justify it. Well, I sponsor people, I do a lot of service work, I do this, I do that, I do everything. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here with a gun in my mouth because I want to blow my head off. So what does it look like? Because I tell you, when you do all that, what God does for us is gives us the key to the door. And the key to the door is a complete acknowledgement that God is doing for us what we can never do for ourselves. Right? My old sponsor gave me a consideration once. I think it's one of the most important things I've ever heard from a sponsor. As we went into step 6 and 7, he asked me this consideration. He says, Jimmy, do you look at the people in your life, the situations in your life, and the circumstances in your life through the lens of a character defect or through the eyes of God? And I'll say that real quick. Do you look at the people in your life, the situations in your life, or the circumstances in your life through the lens of a character defect or through the eyes of God? And I can tell you right now that if you're looking at those three things through the lens of a character defect, you're still living in the darkness of your life. And I know that from experience. So when I look at the people in my life, am I still jealous and envy and angry and fearful and blah, 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 blah? When I look at the situations in my life, whether it's money problems, family problems, work problems, whatever, am I looking at that with, fear or whatever the character defect is? Am I looking at the circumstances of my life, health issues, stuff like that? Or do I look at this stuff through the eyes of God with love and tolerance? If love and tolerance is our code, is it really our code? Do I look at people with forgiveness and compassion and tolerance and patience and lack of judgment? Now, none of us do this perfect. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection, which could become a cop-out line. But the truth of the matter is, we're all human beings on a spiritual walk. Sometimes we're going to lose focus of the walk. But we've been given a toolkit that's been placed at our feet. And when we pick this toolkit up, guess what? We start to grow towards the light and we get out of the darkness. The one thing I have to acknowledge is I have 1 foot in the dark and 1 foot in the light. Nothing grows in the dark. Prayer, meditation, and inventory, when logically related and interwoven, the result is an unshakable foundation for life. And these disciplines are the things that keep us connected and keep us in the light. Without them, a guy like me, I'm lost. So this really comes down to one thing: more God, less Jimmy. And to take the tools of prayer, meditation, and inventory to get into the light. As another great white brother, Reggie, likes to say, we tell our journey to God. We shout the good news. Let me tell you something, the store is open. And what we're selling in our store is hope. And if you don't have hope, grab someone. Grab someone and let them help you. That's all I have. Thanks a lot, guys.
Hey, can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you so much for your service, everybody. And Jimmy, thank you for a beautiful talk. And you said, I liked how you just said right at the end, I loved everything, of course, and how we're selling hope. And so I just finished with a sponsee in her fifth step. And we went through the book. I know, but you know, at the end she talked about a lady sharing at the meeting that she didn't really know if if it was really worth it. And then my sponsee sat right there and said she didn't know if it was really worth it either. And I know what I told her, but what would you say?
Thank you, Dina.
You're breaking up a little bit. You mean if they're not willing to do the work? I'm sorry, is that what you meant, Tina?
That's probably what we ended up talking about, that it does take some work, but just how I try not to oversell nothing, because I know I'm not supposed to sell it. And so but I do talk about it, you know, because I don't want to sell. She just sounded like she's in, but she said she just didn't know how far she was in, or now I'm all mixed up. Anyway.
You got it, Jimmy?
I think so. I don't know. We're not in the arm twisting business, I'll tell you that. So, you know, if people are not willing to do the simple things that you ask a sponsee to do, uh, maybe you're not the person they need.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that sounds kind of drastic, but what am I going to do? You know, if I read the page of top 96, it gives me kind of clear cut directions. You know, maybe I need to get out of the way of their bottom, you know. I don't know. A lot of different people have a lot of different. Call your sponsor. That's what I would do.
Thank you, Jimmy. Is it Howard or Kathy tonight?
In this case, it's Howard. My name is Howard Eben. I am an alcoholic, and I'll be quick. At my age, I've missed things, and you said if we are looking at three things through the eyes of a resentment or through the eyes of the light, it was people, situations, and what was the last thing?
Circumstances.
Thank you very much. God
Thanks,
bless you. Great job, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Nice to see you both. My friend Marilyn, come on in, Marilyn.
Thank you so much, Alice. You know, I love you. Maryland alcoholic. Jimmy, thank you so much. You said so much, and I was taking a lot of good notes. And from what you said, and all of the things that you said, and then you talked about nothing to grow in the dark, and you talked about these secrets. And I have two short questions. One is, you said we must have a proper attitude, and you had another sentence behind that, a proper attitude and a something else, if you remember. But the most important question.
An appropriate feeling for oneself.
Okay,
And
appropriate.
what I meant by that is we can't grow spiritually and avoid our problems and beat ourselves up over the things we've done. We got to look at that stuff head on. It's the
Okay.
only way we'll get free.
Okay, thank you. And part two of this is really important, okay? Because I have a secret, all right? And I'm really doing well in the program, and I feel spiritually fit, right? But I feel like I'm sponsoring myself, and I'm following people around like you and Alice and Ali, and I'm taking notes, and I'm doing the instructions that you're giving me, but I'm not getting this from my sponsor. And I really love her, and I don't want to make a mistake. And so I don't do anything. I just keep sponsoring myself and following you guys around and taking notes and following your instructions. And I take it to God and I meditate. And I just get emotional every time I think about it, but I don't know what to do. And so when you spoke tonight, I knew I couldn't sit with this any longer, and I had to put it out there in the world. That's where I am.
I love
Have
you.
have a conversation with your sponsor. That's all. So that's simple.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Calvin, please come on in.
Oh, Hello, everyone. My name's Calvin. I'm an alcoholic. And Jimmy, thank you for a strong message, man. You know, you always bring a strong message. You know, Jimmy, about 10 years ago, took me back through the steps, and I caught on fire. You know, Jimmy guided me around through certain areas, and my life took off. My life took off. You know, you've helped me tremendously, man. You know, so you know, I just wanted to let you know that, man, and you know, just how much you mean to me. You know, no matter what, we don't talk much no more, but I miss you, and I want to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. My brother.
I'm free for lunch tomorrow.
That's right. Get it in. Come on,
Thank you,
Alan.
Alice. Thank you, Alice. Everybody, Ali. I said that already. Hey, brother. Jimmy, I appreciate you, man. I just, um, there's some, I guess there's those people that exist for everybody that maybe differently, but for me, there's some people that I hear it, where I just, what you say, the spirit from which it comes, it hits these notes inside of me. So I want you to know I appreciate you for that. I have a question for you. You talked about, I know this about you, but you alluded to the fact that you revisit the steps often. Just a two-part question. One is, do you still do it once a year? And two is, can you just give us a little bit of insight into the experiences you've had as a result of doing that, if you don't mind, like overall, how has it been?
Well, I don't go through them every year, but I go through them when I move. So last time I went through them, I guess, was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I think. I can't remember. And I've been very fortunate to have men in my life that always encourage me to go through the steps with someone different. Yes, I've been through with my sponsor, obviously, and but to have a new experience, right? And for me, that has really worked out well. And my first original go through the steps, that guy that that took me through the steps, it was a guy that came from St. Paul, Minnesota, same place where my sponsor lives now, ironically, and he took me through the steps. I had the most unbelievable experience of my life. I got free, and that gentleman wound up drinking and dying, and he had 16 years of sobriety. And back then, the AIDS epidemic was quite big around the New York area, and this gentleman had AIDS, and you know what? He just gave up hope, but he carried a message to me. He carried a message, and he changed my life. And the next guy that came up was Peter Rim. Peter sponsored me for about 17 years. We got very close. We're like brothers, and I needed a new voice in my head. But along that way, I went through the steps with a couple other guys that he encouraged me to see. And again, just peeling the onion back, peeling the onion back. One of the most important things that Peter ever did for me in inventory was when I hit the wall at 13 years of sobriety, and I almost drank. A lot of things went on in my life. I did a lot of bad things, and I paid the price. And but Peter sat me down and he took me through some exercises. They're not in a big book. He got them from sponsorship school, but it changed my viewpoints. It changed my ideas. It changed the way I looked at myself and some of the things that were going on in my head, like these old ideas. And then my sponsor, Bob B from St. Paul, Minnesota, I went through the steps with him. And every person has been different in my life, but every person points me to God. And every person points me to the fact that if I don't uncover, discover, and discard the things in my life that are blocking me from God and blocking me from you, I'll never be a free man. So that's a long answer for a short question. Thanks, Alec.
It's a great answer. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Nash, please come on in.
Hi, everybody. Nash Alcoholic. Thank you, Jimmy. You said something about pride being one of those things that you must let go because it's one of those defects or whatever that will take you out most likely. For you personally, for me personally too, I have a lot of pride. Is there any use for pride? Can we hold on to some pride? I like having pride, and I don't know if there's any good use to it, or we just have to let it go completely.
Well, I think being proud for accomplishments is good, but when it starts to overtake the humility in my life, then that's a problem, right? I believe pride kills more alcoholics than a resentment. Uh-oh, I said something controversial. Right? I believe pride blocks me from really taking a step into the light. Pride says don't look. Pride says don't ask. Pride says I can do it myself. Pride says I don't need to do these stuff. I don't need to go to any length like some of you guys are doing. And pride will, like I said, will always step in when I'm in spiritual stagnation. And that's when my agnosticism comes full bloom. Well, here, God, here's the drink problem, but I'm going to handle the rest of my life as a direct result of that. But the problem with all that is I don't see it until I burn my life to the ground again. Right? But I think from my experience and from sponsoring a lot of men through the years, pride has killed more alcoholics than a resentment.
Thank you, Jimmy. So we have 4 minutes and we have 2 questions. Gwen, I'm going to ask you to come on in, please. Keep it tight so I can get Jill in.
Oh, no worries. Hi, I'm Gwen and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Jimmy, for your message. I've heard you before. I enjoyed you tonight and I'm looking forward to hearing you again next month. My question though is regarding the corners. You said light and promises and something else is in one corner and darkness and bedevilments and something else is in the other corner. Do you remember what the third aspect was in the corners?
I think I made that up as I was going along, but it's just, like if you think of a fight, here's freedom, light. I mean, the promises in one corner, an unbelievable thing. And then in this corner is darkness and bedevilments and, whatever else, right? Just two polar opposites of what we're given here, or the way we live in here.
Right. Well, I loved your message of hope. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Gwen. Okay. Jill, please come on in.
Hey, Miss Olis. My name is Jill, and I am an alcoholic, and I'm grateful to be here. And I have heard you speak before, and I love the way that you deliver. And as I'm listening to you, I think about Don Pritz, and I think about some of the other old timers and how they work through these steps. And I was really and the other thing you had talked about was nothing much grows in the dark except mold, stanky old mold, that black stuff that you just can't get rid of. And it's once it starts, it just continues to eat away at everything. And stepping into the sunlight. And so I liked your analogy with the hallway that you give to the guys out into the sunlight. And that's absolute. You got to walk through this hallway. You got to walk through this darkness. But I was really touched by the woman that shared about the sponsorship and having a sponsor that she's not getting the program from. And I'll tell you what, for myself, and I am not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what happened in my experience was I got that way too. And I got like you did that you were talking at 15, 16 years at the crossroads. And it was like, uh-oh, out a runway here. And I don't know where to go. And that big book, I took myself back through that big book because I didn't have a sponsor or anybody willing to do that. And then I found groups like these, and I found these people, the Ralph Whites and the others, and I started working with others and sharing that with others as I came to understand what I was reading. So you're on the right track. Keep searching. Lots of love.
Thank you, Jill. So I'm going to turn it back over to Teresa, but before I do that, I want to, at a group level, really appreciate you, Jimmy, for how honest you are about what it takes. And the one word that you said that I hope everybody heard is continuous. Is continuous. So thank you for being a light shiner. Thank you for showing up tonight. I really do love you. Teresa, it's all